All right, today we are diving into one of the most fundamental and, let's be honest, one of the most fascinating stories in all of biology. We're talking about the journey of how a new human life begins. It's an incredible process, really, starting from just two single cells and ending with a complete person. So let's break it down. Okay, so first things first, we need to get a key concept down. You'll see this word viverous. Humans, like a lot of other mammals, are viverous. And what does that mean? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It just means we give birth to live young. So unlike animals that lay eggs, the whole epic story of development, from that single cell all the way to a baby, it all happens inside the mother's body. And that internal journey is exactly what we're going to explore. So here's our roadmap for this amazing story. We're going to start with a reproductive blueprint, then look at how life's little messengers get created. We'll dive into the menstrual cycle, the moment of fertilization and implantation, follow the whole 9 months of development, and wrap things up with the grand finale, birth and beyond. All right, first up, the reproductive blueprint. Before we get into the how, we need to understand the what. Who are the key players here? So we're going to look at the essential structures of both the male and female systems. Okay, so if we look at this from a bird's eye view, both systems have a primary organ, right? For males, it's the testis. For females, it's the ovary. And their main job? It's to produce what we call gametes. Those are the reproductive cells, so sperm in males and the ovum or egg in females. Now, a really key difference is where they are. The male system is mostly external, and there's a good reason for that. It helps keep things a little cooler, which is better for sperm production. Meanwhile, the female system is tucked away safely inside the pelvic region. Okay, now we're going to zoom in, way in, from the big picture of the organs down to the microscopic level. So how are these little messengers of life, the sperm and the egg, how are they actually made? Well, the scientific name for this whole process is gametogenesis. So in males, this process is called spermatogenesis, and it really kicks into high gear around puberty. It starts with these cells called spermatogonia, and they go through this special two-stage division called meiosis. Now, the most important thing to remember about meiosis is what it does to the chromosomes. It cuts the number in half, from 46 down to 23. And that is absolutely crucial. Why? Because when the sperm and egg eventually meet, you need their chromosomes to add up to the correct total of 46. The final step in this whole chain is transforming these cells into what we all recognize as spermatozoa or sperm. And the sheer scale of this production is just mind-boggling. We're talking about 200 to 300 million sperm in a single ejaculation. And there's a very good reason for these massive numbers. The journey to the egg is incredibly tough, really hazardous, and only the absolute strongest and fastest are even going to get close. It is the ultimate numbers game. Now, the process for females, which is called oogenesis, it's remarkably different. Get this, it actually begins before a female is even born. I mean, all the potential eggs she will ever have are formed during her own embryonic development, and then they just hit pause. Just think about that for a second. Some of these cells are going to wait patiently for decades before they even get a chance to mature. Then, starting at puberty, one of these cells finishes its first division each month. This creates one single large, viable egg and these other tiny cells called polar bodies that basically just dissolve. So, here's another huge difference. Unlike the continuous non-stop production of sperm, the supply of eggs is finite. There's a limited number. At the start of puberty, each ovary holds somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 of these primary follicles. And that number just goes down over time, which is what eventually leads to menopause. So, that brings us to the next big piece of the puzzle, the clockwork that controls when that single egg gets released. We're talking about the menstrual cycle. It's this incredibly complex, highly coordinated series of events that prepares the body for a potential pregnancy month after month. Let's break down a typical 28-day cycle. It kicks off with the menstrual phase. That's when the uterine lining is shed. Right after that, we go into the follicular phase. This is where a follicle in the ovary starts to grow and mature. And at the same time, the uterine lining starts rebuilding. Then comes the main event, usually around day 14, ovulation. An egg is released, and that brings us to the final part, the luteal phase, where the uterus gets everything ready just in case a fertilized egg is on its way. Now, this whole cycle doesn't just happen randomly. It's directed by what you can think of as a hormonal orchestra. And the conductor, that's a signal from the brain called GnRH. GnRH tells the pituitary gland, hey, release these two key hormones. Those are LH and FSH. And they, in turn, signal the ovaries to produce estrogen and progesterone. These are the hormones that actually manage the follicle growth and the uterine lining. It is an incredibly precise and elegant feedback loop. But what happens if that window of opportunity closes? What if the egg that's released doesn't get fertilized? Well, if there's no fertilization, the body gets the signal. The corpus luteum breaks down, progesterone levels drop, and that causes the uterine lining to break down too. And just like that, the cycle starts all over again. But if the timing is right, if everything aligns perfectly, then we get to the next incredible chapter. This is the moment of union, where two separate cells are about to become one. Now, fertilization isn't just a casual meeting. You can think of it as having a very, very specific time and address. The meeting point is the ampullary region of the fallopian tube, and it's all about timing. The sperm and the egg have to show up in this exact spot at pretty much the exact same time for anything to happen. The odds are actually pretty slim when you think about it. Okay, so once that one lucky sperm fuses with the egg, a brand new single cell is formed, called a zygote. And right away, it gets to work. It starts dividing, a process called cleavage, and it quickly becomes this little ball of cells called a morula. As it's traveling down towards the uterus, the morula keeps developing and turns into a blastocyst. And then comes the final, absolutely critical step, implantation. That's when the blastocyst snuggles in and embeds itself into the uterine wall. And that, right there, is the official start of a pregnancy. So at this very moment, something else is decided: the biological sex of the new individual. It's actually pretty straightforward. Every single egg carries an X chromosome, no exceptions. Sperm, on the other hand, are a toss-up. They can carry either an X or a Y. So if a sperm with an X chromosome fertilizes the egg, you get XX, a female. If a sperm with a Y chromosome wins the race, you get XY, a male. So the determining factor actually comes from the sperm. Once implantation is successful, the 9-month marathon of transformation officially begins. This is the period we call gestation, and it's where that tiny cluster of cells, the blastocyst, will develop into a fully formed fetus. And the pace of development is just absolutely extraordinary. Think about this. After only 1 month, the embryo's heart is already formed and beating. By the end of month 2, you can see limbs and digits taking shape. And by the time the first trimester is over, most of the major organ systems are already formed. Then in the second trimester, you get these other amazing milestones, like the first little movements that can be felt, hair appearing on the head, and eyelids that finally separate. So after about 9 months of this unbelievable growth and development, we finally arrive at the grand finale of the entire journey: birth. The scientific term for childbirth is parturition, and what's really fascinating here is who kicks things off. You might think it's the mother's body that decides, okay, time to go, but the signal to begin actually comes from the fully developed fetus and the placenta. They're the ones that send the first signal, which triggers those initial mild uterine contractions. And that first signal kicks off this incredibly powerful positive feedback loop. It works like this. Those initial contractions trigger the mother's body to release a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin then causes even stronger contractions. And guess what? Those stronger contractions stimulate the release of more oxytocin. This cycle just keeps amplifying itself, getting stronger and stronger, driving the process of labor forward until the baby is born. But the story doesn't just end the moment the baby is born. For the first few days, the mother produces this special kind of milk called colostrum. And this stuff is liquid gold. It's not just food, it is jam-packed with essential antibodies. It's basically the newborn's first line of defense, helping to build up their immune system for life outside the womb. So when you think about it, from the hormonal orchestra of the menstrual cycle to that powerful feedback loop of birth, it is just a journey of unbelievable precision. And it's wild to remember that this entire 9-month journey begins with the simple fusion of 2 single cells. So what does this intricate, almost magical process tell us about the nature of life itself? Just something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.